With Avengers Doomsday just around the corner, we've been getting a flurry of Marvel news from every direction. And as we get ready for this new multiversal adventure, we've all heard the good news that Avengers Endgame will be re-releasing as Avengers Endgame Encore. Of course, you should go watch it because you gotta brush up on what happened. I mean, some of us are legit rewatching the entire 15 film and show list that Marvel has revealed as a must-watch before Doomsday. But even more importantly, Endgame Encore will have at least 4 to 7 minutes of new footage. And that is a whole lot of footage. Not because of quantity, but rather quality. This extra footage is going to be absolutely crucial in tying the film to Avengers Doomsday, and even explaining a few important things before we watch the ultimate showdown. Fortunately for you, we've been keeping up with all of it, and we're here to break down some of the insane stuff that is going to be there in Encore. That'll change a lot of things. Get your tissues ready, guys, because we're going down the heartbreaking time travel journey once again. But hey, on the bright side, at least we know RDJ is coming back. And on that note, let's get started. Avengers Endgame is to blame for Doctor Doom. This is basically the whole context and the main reason behind the re-release. Avengers Endgame Encore will basically serve as the connecting link to Doomsday. Now, most of us already know that Doomsday is going to be dealing with the multiversal threat of incursions, where we will literally watch whole universes die. But did you know that it's actually the events of Endgame that are to blame here? Yep, I know we all loved and cheered on our favorite heroes as they went on the time heist and plucked up Infinity Stones. What could go wrong, right? Well, everything. You see, messing with time has consequences. The Ancient One had warned us. No matter how much Smart Hulk convinced us that nothing would happen because they returned the stones to the exact time that they're taking it from, maybe, just maybe, we should have listened to the Sorcerer Supreme instead. She explicitly mentioned that regardless of what they did, the mere action of them taking away the stones would create branched timelines, and that wouldn't be harmless. Of course, Hulk was also wrong about the fact that nothing would go wrong in the time heist, and they created at least one timeline where Loki stole the Tesseract and was eventually taken by the TVA, meaning that there was one timeline that existed without a Space Stone. Plus, when Marvel showed us the new trailer for Endgame Encore at San Diego Comic-Con this year, there was one particular line that confirms this theory of Endgame connecting to Doomsday. In the new trailer, Iron Man says the line, "You mess with time, it tends to mess back." And that's exactly what some of that new footage is going to show us. We'll finally see the devastating consequences of the time heist, and how it directly leads to destabilizing universes and a literal multiversal crisis that will start the road to Doomsday. We did hear another little fan theory, though it's not entirely confirmed. If you remember, in the original Avengers Endgame, the credits scene had a hammer clinking sound repeating 6 times. And back then, we all thought it was just Tony Stark's Iron Man, maybe even from the first film, where he creates the makeshift suit in the cave. Like a tribute, you know? But now, many fans are wondering if that was actually a reference to Doom, who also created his own mask and armor. Of course, this is a long stretch, given that Marvel had slightly different plans initially when Endgame came out. But hey, they've always been pretty quick to adapt, and this is indeed a very interesting theory. What do you guys think? Steve Rogers' ending gets new context. This is another very important aspect. We all know from the official Doomsday trailer that Chris Evans is back as Steve Rogers. But even more importantly, in the special look trailer, we saw 2 very important things. Well, the first one being, which we heard in the trailer, Dr. Doom says that the heroes have been living stolen lives. This is absolutely spot on, and Doom is essentially referring to the time heist, and how all these heroes basically just unraveled time and erased events to bring back those who were lost to the snap. Something we've already covered in the previous point. But the most important stolen life is definitely that of Steve Rogers. You see, it wasn't just Loki's disappearance that sent ripples into timelines. It was also Steve never returning to his original timeline. When he went back to return the Infinity Stones, he also stayed back to live a life with his beloved Peggy Carter, creating another deadly timeline rift. The second thing we see in the trailer really puts this into perspective. You see, as Doom is talking about stolen lives, we see a lot of heroes flash across our screen, including Ant-Man with his daughter, Thor with Love, and many others. But most importantly, we see Steve Rogers holding a baby. He went back and became a father. He got his ideal life. Rather, he took his ideal life. Some can even say he stole it. so we're expecting some scenes in Endgame to bridge this gap. Previously, we only saw Steve Rogers leave and then come back as an aged man sitting on that bench, ready to give up his shield and die in peace. But this time, we'll probably get to see some of what happened in between, maybe even someone watching on, as Rogers gets the happy ending he always wanted. And there's a reason why we're saying that. Doom has a very strong motivation to despise all these heroes, especially Steve Rogers. If you've watched the special look trailer, you'll remember that Sue Storm says, "Victor was always the smartest guy in every room. He used to be different, used to be kind, used to be caring, and then everything he loved was taken from him. I knew he was lost, but I did not realize that he was broken." And a few scenes later, we see Doom staring up at a painting of a mother with her son. Connecting the dots, we think Doom loses his own wife and son, and that drives him to hate even more. So, of course, Steve and his stolen life become central to the Doomsday plot. And Chris Evans has himself said that Endgame was the perfect ending for his character, and he would only return to the MCU if it absolutely made sense. Well, guess what, Evans? It makes sense! The Tony Stark funeral scene. Now, this is another highly speculated scene that's going to be a new addition in Endgame Encore, specifically to Tony Stark's funeral scene. Don't worry, the OG scene with all the heroes gathered as the camera pans to them in one sweeping shot will still be there. That's not going anywhere. And if you're anything like me, you'll probably cry all over again. But no, this scene will probably take place after that sweeping shot, and it'll involve three very important characters. It'll show Steve Rogers talking with Pepper Potts and Scott Lang, maybe even with another undisclosed character present there. Of course, Steve's role is important here, not just because of all that we've covered previously, but because we don't really get to see him in the aftermath, except during his own ending scene. This scene might show us more of his side, especially since he's going to be talking to Pepper, and he and Tony never really got to properly sort things out after Civil War. It might end up being a pretty emotionally laden scene. However, the biggest point of conversation between the three is going to be about time travel. They'll be discussing the rules of time travel and everything that went down, and how they'll return the stone before it goes wrong. This scene will act as the transition to a few more additional scenes that we'll discuss after this, and of course, to Doomsday and the whole TVA plotline that Doomsday is setting up. And it completely makes sense, because why else would Scott Lang, aka Ant-Man, be a part of the conversation? He's the reason behind the time heist. It was his experience in the quantum realm in Ant-Man and the Wasp that led to the events of Endgame. And if there's anyone other than Smart Hulk who could make sense of all this time travel stuff, it's Scott Lang. We've also got another person joining the scene, and we don't know who. But it does seem like the perfect opportunity to sort of reintroduce and bring to the forefront a character that we've maybe forgotten about, or someone who's going to be an important part of the upcoming film. After all, it's a funeral scene with almost every hero and familiar face present. If you ask me, I think this scene is going to be important, or rather necessary for another reason. It'll be important to sort of reinforce Tony Stark's death and let that remain permanent, now that Robert Downey Jr. is coming back to take on the role of Victor Von Doom. Too many fans have been expecting Doom to secretly be Tony, or be an Iron Man variant and whatnot. But that just feels wrong, you know? Iron Man has had the perfect ending. He's had his whole arc. He's had his hero moment, multiple ones. And we've all heard his iconic line, "I am Iron Man." It's time to move on, guys. Linking Tony to Doom just dilutes his memory and legacy. So this re-release could finalize Stark's fate one last time, and prepare us for the whole new emotional journey that RDJ will bring to the screen with Doom. The multiverse begins breaking. Okay, so this is one of the scenes that we're expecting to come after the Tony Stark funeral bit. Instead of just leaving things at that, Encore will show us what happens after Steve leaves and timelines start to fracture. It could be like a short and simple visual of timelines branching, much in the same way that the Ancient One showed us. Or it could be an actual montage of timelines branching and those ripples reaching the TVA and Loki. It might even show us entire universes colliding, and the threat of incursions looming over our hero. Of course, we would love it if some of this extra footage involved characters from the two other universes that are going to be involved in Doomsday, aka Earth 828, home of the Fantastic Four, and Earth 10005, home to the Fox X-Men. But that might be asking for too much. Some fans have theorized that there could be a scene showing that Thanos' snap also affected other universes, and we'd see what happened in the Fox X-Men universe and even the Raimi Spider-Man universe, which everyone is saying will show up in Doomsday along with Tobey Maguire. And they'll also lose half their population before they return 5 years later. And maybe that's why the X-Men will attack Raimi's Spider-Man, which is the rumor that's been going around. As for Fantastic Four, well, they were in the 60s when we last saw them. But of course, we don't think that's a super accurate theory. Because from what we saw and heard in the Multiverse of Madness, every universe has its own Thanos and Infinity Stone. And it was revealed that at least in one of the universes, Thanos was actually stopped by Doctor Strange using the Darkhold, which means a snap in the OG MCU universe won't really affect the others. However, we could still see the X-Men vs. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man be set up, just in a slightly different way. Instead of the snap, it's the time heist that starts causing incursions that affect other universes. New mid- and post-credit scene. And sure, the previous scenes of timelines branching will lead us directly to the new post-credit scene. We don't know whether we'll get 2 credit scenes, but we do know we'll get at least one for sure. And it'll be something super significant. Back when Endgame was originally released, it famously did not have a post-credit scene that we Marvel fans had gotten so used to. Literally, the entire hall was still seated right till the end. But nope, nothing. And that's how it was meant to be. It was meant to be a final ending. And now that Doomsday is coming up, Endgame is no longer the end, but just the beginning. So naturally, it's the post-credit scene that's going to bridge the gap. One of the possibilities that we pretty much think is confirmed is that the post-credits will show us Loki visiting Steve Rogers and Peggy Carter, and I guess their baby, to warn Steve of what's coming. To reveal to him that leaving and staying back in time has had multiverse-ending consequences with branched timelines and incursions. This would directly set up Doomsday and obviously also leave us, the audience, on the edge of our seats. Of course, it could be something else entirely, maybe a glimpse of Doom, or maybe an old shot of him before he became Doom, him with the Fantastic Four. It could be literally anything, but we think the best connection is through Loki and Steve Rogers, the 2 people who permanently altered the course of the multiverse without even knowing what they were doing. And that brings us to the end, guys. This re-release might not be as exciting as Doomsday, but it's still important for the narrative connection. Marvel, ever since Infinity Wars and Endgame, has been struggling to find its footing. And let's be honest, that's me being generous. Yeah, they've had some good shows like Loki, Moon Knight, and even WandaVision, but the Multiverse of Madness shitstorm and every other film since has been super underwhelming. The new character introductions haven't hit the mark, and that feeling of a connected universe is completely gone. And this is even more so because their entire plan was derailed. Doomsday was never supposed to happen like this. For 2 whole seasons of Loki and 1 film, aka Quantumania, Kang was built up as the next villain, someone who would clearly facilitate the timeline chaos and the multiverse saga. But after things did not work out with Jonathan Majors, they had to completely switch and scrap the whole Avengers the Kang Dynasty project. So the only way to set up Doomsday now is to go back to Endgame and retell the story under a different light. And that's exactly what Feige and the Russo brothers are trying to do. So it's time to get on board and go relive the good old days of pre-COVID 2019. The Russo brothers have even added a customized intro sequence this time. Do you guys have any theories about what the new footage will be? Let us know in the comments down below. And as always, don't forget to smash the like button if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel for more such content. We'll see you soon. Until then, start booking your Encore tickets. Goodbye.